The combat deck aboard Outpost Nexus 12 hummed with energy, both from the holographic drone zipping through the air and from the diverse group of cadets training on the reinforced mats below. The space was impressive, a vast chamber with high ceilings that accommodated various gravity settings for different species. Gleaming metal walls reflected the station's artificial light, creating an atmosphere that was both sterile and intimidating. Among the cadets, 15-year-old Zara Lin stood out not for her physical presence. She was wiry and small compared to many of the other species, but for the fierce determination in her eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation knot, and her training uniform bore the insignia of a third-year cadet, unlike some of her peers who came from military dynasties spanning galaxies. Zara's pride came from a more personal legacy. Her grandfather, who she believed had once been a legendary weapons instructor for the Emperor's elite forces. At the center of the combat deck, surveying the cadets with cold, unblinking eyes, stood Instructor Voktal. The hulking reptiloid scales shimmered with an iridescent green that darkened around his neck frill, a sign of dominance in his species. His reputation preceded him across 3 sectors: ruthless drills, merciless criticism, and training methods that produced results, albeit through fear rather than inspiration. Positions! Voktal's voice boomed across the deck, and cadets scrambled to their assigned spots. Today we drill counterattacks against multiple assailants. Failure means extra night rotations. Excellence. He paused, his lipless mouth stretching into what passed for a smile. Means you avoid my personal attention. The cadets exchanged nervous glances. Voktal's personal attention was notoriously painful and humiliating. For 3 grueling hours, the cadets practiced defensive maneuvers against holographic drones programmed to attack from various angles. Sweat pooled beneath Zara's uniform as she ducked, rolled, and countered with precision. Unlike some of the physically stronger species, she relied on speed and anticipation, traits her grandfather had emphasized during their private sessions in the station's maintenance corridors. When Voktal finally called a break, Zara collapsed onto a bench near the hydration station, gulping down purified water alongside several other human cadets and an Andromedan named Alex, whose translucent skin revealed the coursing of blue fluid through their circulatory system. Voktal's pushing harder than usual, Alex noted, their voice resonating with a slight echo characteristic of their species. Rumor is Imperial evaluators are coming next month. Corinne, a stocky Tauran with small horns protruding from his forehead, snorted. He's just building his reputation to charge more for private sessions. My sibling had to pay 2 months' rations for extra training. That's not right, Zara said quietly. Training shouldn't be about profit. My grandfather never charged his students extra. He said true instruction was about honoring potential, not exploiting it. The group fell silent, and Zara realized she'd drawn attention to herself. Normally quiet during these social moments, she rarely mentioned her family. Your grandfather was an instructor? Alex asked, their skin shifting to a curious shade of lavender. Zara nodded, a hint of pride warming her face. He was a master weapons instructor for the Emperor's elite guards, before he retired to become a station mechanic. A few cadets exchanged skeptical glances. Corinne's bovine features twisted into a smirk. Sure, and my ancestor was the Emperor himself. Come on. Lin, everyone knows your grandfather is just the old human who fixes the recycling units on level 7. It's true, Zara insisted, her voice rising slightly. He doesn't talk about it much, but… What's true? Cadet Lin. The group froze as Instructor Voktal's massive form loomed over them. His head tilted with predatory interest. Yellow eyes fixed on Zara. Nothing. Instructor, Zara mumbled, suddenly finding the floor fascinating. No, please. Voktal's voice dripped with mock courtesy. Share with the class. I heard something about your grandfather? The silence on the combat deck was absolute now. All cadets had stopped to watch the exchange, sensing the dangerous undercurrent. Zara swallowed hard, but lifted her chin. I was saying that my grandfather was once an instructor for the Imperial Guard, sir. Voktal's neck frill expanded slightly, a sign of amusement or aggression, sometimes both. Jorin Lin? The maintenance worker. His laughter was like stones grinding together. I've seen him struggling with a fusion spanner. The man can barely hold a tool, let alone train elite warriors. Several cadets laughed nervously, eager to align themselves with Voktal's mockery. He was, Zara insisted, her voice smaller but still firm. He doesn't demonstrate it anymore, but… The slap came so fast that Zara didn't see it coming. Voktal's scaled hand connected with her cheek with a crack that echoed across the combat deck. The force knocked her sideways, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. This, Voktal announced to the stunned cadets, is what happens when fantasy replaces discipline, when lies replace respect. He loomed over Zara, who was still reeling from the blow. Your grandfather is nothing. You are less than nothing. And this lesson in humility is the most valuable training you'll receive today. Zara's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to cry. The humiliation was worse than the pain, the pitying glances from some cadets, the smirks from others. The absolute authority with which Voktal had dismissed not only her claim, but her worth as a cadet. Resume training positions, Voktal barked, turning away as if the incident were already forgotten. Simulation Level 3. Commence in 30 seconds. The cadets hurried back to their places, avoiding eye contact with Zara as she slowly picked herself up. For the remainder of the session, she moved mechanically through the drills, her body responding from muscle memory while her mind remained numb with shock. When dismissal finally came, Zara was the first to leave, slipping away before anyone could approach her. Instead of heading to the cadet quarters, she descended into the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels of the station. Here, among the humming conduits and recycling pipes, she had spent countless hours with her grandfather, learning what she had believed were ancient combat techniques passed down through generations of Imperial guards. Had it all been fantasy? A kind old man's stories to impress a granddaughter? The doubt crept through her like a poison. Word of the incident spread quickly through the station's communication channels. By evening, when Zara finally emerged from the tunnels and returned to the small quarters she shared with her grandfather, Jorin Lin was waiting for her. His weathered face, lined with age and years of working in the station's harsh environments, revealed nothing as she entered. I heard what happened, he said simply, his voice rough but gentle. Your face is swollen. Zara touched her cheek, wincing at the tenderness there. It doesn't matter. It matters, Jorin replied, rising from his chair with a slight stiffness in his movements. At 62, he was considered elderly for a human in active service, even in maintenance. Tell me exactly what was said. As Zara recounted the humiliation on the combat deck, her grandfather's expression remained unreadable. When she finished, he simply nodded once and walked to his sleeping quarters. She heard him rummaging through his personal storage unit, a battered metal container he'd brought with him when they'd first arrived at Nexus 12 3 years ago. When he returned, he held something small in his palm. Without a word, he extended his hand to Zara. Lying in his calloused palm was a medallion, a gleaming insignia bearing the imperial crest surrounded by 12 stars, each representing a core world of the empire. Even Zara, with her limited knowledge of imperial hierarchy, recognized it as the mark of the emperor's personal guard, a position so elite that most believed it to be more legend than reality. "Grandfather," she whispered, looking from the insignia to his face. "There's a time for hiding," Joran said quietly, "and a time for truth. I think tomorrow calls for truth. Don't you?" For the first time since Voktal's slap, Zara felt something other than shame. It started as a small ember in her chest and grew steadily. Not quite hope, not quite vindication, but something powerful nonetheless. "What are we going to do?" she asked. Joran's weathered face creased into a smile that held secrets and strength in equal measure. "We're going to attend your morning training session. Together." The next morning, as cadets filed into the combat deck for the daily session, an unusual tension permeated the air. Rumors had already begun circulating. Some said Zara would be formally dismissed from the program. Others that she had filed a complaint against Voktal with station authorities. None expected what actually transpired. Zara entered the deck alongside a figure that many recognized but few had ever really noticed. The old maintenance worker from level 7, Joran Lin. Today. However, there was something different about the way he carried himself. Though he wore simple maintenance coveralls, his posture was impeccable, his movements fluid and purposeful. The medallion of the Imperial Guard gleamed against the dark fabric over his heart. Conversations died as they walked across the training area. Cadets stepped aside, sensing a shift in the usual order. Voktal, who had been adjusting the settings on a training drone, turned slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing at the unexpected intrusion. "Civilians are not permitted on the combat deck during training hours," he announced, voice cold with authority. "Remove yourself. Maintenance worker." Joran stopped at a respectful distance, hands clasped behind his back in a stance that somehow appeared both relaxed and alert. "Good morning. Instructor Voktal, I believe we need to address an incident from yesterday involving my granddaughter." Voktal's neck frill expanded slightly in irritation. "There is nothing to address. Cadet discipline is my domain, not yours. Leave now, or I'll have security remove you." Several cadets had formed a loose circle around them, including Alex and Corin, their expressions uncertain as they watched the confrontation unfold. "Before I leave," Joran said, calmly, "I'd like to verify your credentials as an instructor. I understand you claim combat experience in the Outer Rim conflicts and certification from the Rigelian Combat Academy." A dangerous stillness came over Voktal. "You dare question my authority, an old human who spends his days fixing waste processors? I question what I do not know to be true." Joran replied, his voice remaining level. "Just as you questioned what you did not know about me." The tension in the room thickened. Cadets exchanged glances, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Voktal's laugh was harsh. "Very well. If public humiliation is what you seek, I'll oblige." He stepped forward, towering over Joran by at least 2 feet. "A demonstration. Then, you and me. When you're carried out on a stretcher, perhaps your granddaughter will finally learn her place." Joran nodded once. "A demonstration would be educational for all present. Shall we use training staffs? Non-lethal, of course." Voktal's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his species. "By all means, I want the cadets to see exactly how long a maintenance worker lasts against a true combat instructor." A cadet hurried forward with 2 training staffs, lightweight but durable composite rods designed to simulate energy weapons without the lethal consequences. Voktal snatched one, twirling it with practiced showmanship before settling into an aggressive stance. Joran accepted the other with a polite nod, holding it loosely at his side as if uncertain what to do with it. "Grandfather," Zara whispered, suddenly afraid. Voktal was known for accidentally causing injuries during demonstrations. Joran gave her a reassuring smile. "Watch carefully," he said softly. "There's a lesson here beyond combat." The 2 figures faced each other in the center of a hastily cleared circle. Voktal, massive and imposing in his instructor's uniform, scales gleaming under the deck lights. Joran, smaller and seemingly frail in his maintenance coveralls. The Imperial Guard medallion, the only hint that he might be more than he appeared. "Begin whenever you're ready, old man," Voktal taunted, his staff cutting impressive patterns through the air. What happened next occurred so quickly that many cadets would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. Voktal lunged forward with surprising speed for his size. The staff aimed directly at Joran's chest in a move clearly intended to end the confrontation immediately and painfully. Joran's response was a blur of motion. He seemed to barely move, yet somehow Voktal's strike met empty air. In the same fluid moment, Joran's staff tapped lightly against the reptiloid's extended wrist, then his ankle, then the sensitive junction where neck met shoulder. Voktal stumbled, off balance and disoriented by the precision of the counterattack. Before he could recover, Joran had somehow circled behind him, with a movement too elegant to be called a strike. The old human hooked his staff around Voktal's and twisted, sending the instructor's weapon clattering across the deck floor. A collective gasp rose from the watching cadets. Voktal, weaponless and furious, spun around with a roar, massive fists swinging toward Joran's head. Again. The old man seemed to simply not be where the blow should have landed. Instead, he was behind Voktal, his staff now positioned precisely at the base of the reptiloid skull, a point known to be particularly vulnerable in his species. "Enough," Joran said, quietly, but his voice carried across the suddenly silent combat deck. "There's no need for further demonstration." Voktal froze, aware of the staff at his most vulnerable point. "A lucky move," he hissed. "I underestimated." "You did," Joran agreed, lowering his staff and stepping back. "Just as you underestimated the consequences of striking my granddaughter yesterday." He turned to address the circle of stunned cadets. "My name is Joran Lin. For 26 years, I served as the senior combat instructor for the Emperor's personal guard. I retired to this station not out of necessity, but by choice, to raise my granddaughter away from the politics and dangers of the Imperial core worlds." The revelation sent a ripple through the gathering. Eyes widened, and several cadets looked at Zara with new respect. "A convenient claim," Voktal spat, attempting to regain his dignity as he retrieved his staff. "Anyone can buy a medallion on the black markets." "True," Joran acknowledged. "Just as anyone can purchase falsified credentials from certain academies in the Outer Rim. Which brings me to my second purpose here today." From a pocket in his coveralls, Joran produced a small data chip. This contains records from the Rigelian Combat Academy for the past 15 years. You'll note the absence of any graduate matching instructor Voktal's description or biometric data. Voktal's neck frill flattened against his scales, a sign of alarm in his species. "You have no authority to—" "I also have records," Joran continued calmly. of complaints filed by cadets and their families across 3 different training outposts before this one. Complaints of excessive force, unauthorized financial demands, and falsified evaluation scores. The combat deck had grown so quiet that the hum of the station's life support systems seemed loud by comparison. Cadets exchanged shocked glances, some nodding in recognition of the accusations. This is slander," Voktal hissed, but there was a new note in his voice, the beginning of fear. Alex stepped forward, their translucent skin pulsing with emotion. "He charged my family 3 months of ration credits for specialized training that never happened. He told me I failed qualification unless I paid for his personal instruction," another cadet added, a young Solarian whose light-emitting skin dimmed with the memory. "He said my evaluation would be sent to the Imperial Academy," Corin admitted, his tauren features set in anger. "But when my parent checked, no record was ever received." One by one, cadets began to speak up, sharing stories of intimidation, financial exploitation, and abuse of authority. What had begun as a personal confrontation was rapidly becoming something larger, a reckoning. The deck's communication panel suddenly chimed, and a voice announced, "Attention combat deck. This is station security. We have received multiple alert signals from your location. Please confirm status." Before anyone could respond, the deck's doors slid open to admit several hovering media drones, the small, sophisticated devices used by the station's news network to broadcast events of interest to the population. Behind them came 2 security officers and a civilian wearing the insignia of the station's administrative council. "Perfect timing," Joran said, turning to address the newcomers. "I believe you'll find this situation of considerable interest to station governance." The confrontation that had begun as a personal matter between Zara, her grandfather, and an abusive instructor had suddenly become a very public scandal. The media drones captured everything: the cadets' testimonies, Voktal's increasingly desperate denials, and the damning evidence on Joran's data chip. Within hours, station authorities had locked down the combat deck and suspended all training activities pending a full investigation. Voktal was escorted to security holding, his protestations of persecution fading as more evidence of his fraudulent credentials and exploitative practices emerged. For Zara, watching the instructor who had humiliated her being led away in disgrace should have felt like vindication. Instead, she felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the truth had emerged, concern for her fellow cadets whose training was now disrupted, and uncertainty about what would come next. "What happens now?" she asked her grandfather as they left the combat deck, followed by curious glances and whispered conversations. Joran's weathered face was thoughtful. "Now we have a choice. We can return to our quiet life, you as a cadet, me as a maintenance worker, or we can offer an alternative." "An alternative?" "There are many ways to learn combat skills, Zara. Not all of them involve fear and exploitation." He gestured toward the group of cadets who were now clustered in the corridor, looking lost without their usual routine. These young people deserve better instruction than they've received. Perhaps it's time I stopped hiding my past and put it to good use. 2 weeks later, the unused hydroponics bay on level 5 had been transformed. The space, originally designed to grow supplementary food crops but abandoned due to budget cuts, now featured padded training mats salvaged from storage, simple wooden practice weapons crafted by volunteer parents, and sun lamps repurposed to provide proper lighting. Plants still grew along the periphery, creating an atmosphere that was part garden, part training ground. Here, cadets gathered voluntarily during free hours. There was no official sanction yet, The station authorities were still untangling the mess Voktal had left behind, but no one interfered with what was quickly becoming the most popular unofficial activity on Nexus 12. At the center of it all was Jorin Lin, no longer disguised as a simple maintenance worker, though he still performed his regular duties. During training hours, he wore a simple black tunic bearing the small Imperial Guard insignia. His teaching style was a revelation to cadets accustomed to Voktal's brutality, patient, precise, and focused on principles rather than punishment. More surprising to many was Zara's emergence as a leader among her peers. Where once she had been quiet and solitary, she now moved confidently among the cadets, demonstrating techniques her grandfather had taught her over the years and helping newcomers master basic forms. "Keep your center lower," she instructed Corin, who was struggling with a balance exercise. "Like this. Feel how it changes your stability?" The Tauren nodded, his expression concentrated as he adjusted his stance. "I see what you mean. It's completely different from how Voktal taught us." "That's because he was teaching for show, not function," Zara explained. "Real combat isn't about looking impressive. It's about efficiency and survival." Across the improvised training floor, Alex was working with a group of younger cadets, their translucent skin glowing with enthusiasm as they practiced a simple defensive sequence. Other cadets moved through different exercises, the atmosphere focused but relaxed, a stark contrast to the tension that had always permeated Voktal's sessions. Jorin moved among them, offering quiet corrections and occasional demonstrations, though he was clearly the master here. He encouraged a collaborative environment where experienced cadets helped newcomers and questions were welcomed rather than punished. During a water break, he approached Zara with a small smile. "You've become quite the instructor yourself," he observed. "The others respect you." Zara felt a flush of pride. "I'm just sharing what you taught me." "And adding your own insights," Jorin corrected. "That's how knowledge truly grows, not by simple repetition, but by evolution." They watched the cadets for a moment, many of whom were chatting and laughing during the break, another stark difference from the silent, fearful atmosphere of Voktal's training. "The station administrator contacted me this morning," Jorin said, quietly. "They've officially dismissed Voktal and revoked his credentials. Apparently, our little revelation prompted investigations at 2 other outposts where he previously worked. The scandal has reached even the Imperial Center." "What does that mean for the cadet program here?" Zara asked. "That's what they wanted to discuss. They've offered me the position of official combat instructor for Nexus 12. Zara's eyes widened. "That's wonderful. Are you going to accept?" Jorin's expression grew thoughtful. "I told them I would consider it, on one condition." He turned to face his granddaughter directly. "That you be named as assistant instructor, with the understanding that you'll take over full responsibilities when you turn 18. "Me?" Zara's voice came out as a squeak. "But I haven't—" "You're a natural teacher, Zara. You understand not just the techniques but the principles behind them. More importantly, you understand people, when to push, when to support." He gestured toward the training area, where cadets were returning to their exercises. "Look at what you've helped create in just 2 weeks. This isn't just about combat training anymore. It's about building a community based on mutual respect." Zara looked around at the transformed hydroponics bay, at the cadets who now greeted her with smiles and questions rather than mockery or indifference. It was true. Something important had changed, and not just in her external circumstances. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "No one ever feels ready for responsibility," Jorin replied with a gentle smile. But that hesitation, that humility, is precisely what makes you right for this role. Voktal never doubted himself, never questioned his methods or motives. That certainty was his greatest weakness. From a pocket in his tunic, Joran withdrew the Imperial Guard medallion. He held it out to Zara, its polished surface catching the light from the hydroponics lamps. "This belonged to me, but its meaning belongs to you now," he said, not as a symbol of past glory or authority, but as a reminder that honor comes from how we treat others, not from titles or power. Zara accepted the medallion with trembling fingers, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic, in her palm. "I'll try to be worthy of it," she promised. "You already are," Joran assured her. "You proved that when you refused to let Voktal's cruelty define you, when you chose to help build something better instead of seeking revenge." As if on cue, several cadets called out to Zara, asking for her assistance with a particular technique. She slipped the medallion into her pocket and rejoined the group, moving with a confidence that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. Joran watched his granddaughter with quiet pride. The past he had tried to leave behind had caught up with him. But perhaps that wasn't the tragedy he had feared it would be. Sometimes old legacies needed to be reclaimed and reshaped, just as this abandoned hydroponics bay had been transformed into something new and vital. Across the training floor, Zara demonstrated a complex maneuver to an attentive group of cadets. Her movements were fluid and precise, clearly influenced by his teaching, but distinctly her own style. When she completed the sequence, the cadets broke into spontaneous applause. Joran smiled. The true measure of a teacher wasn't in personal glory or authority, but in what lived on through students. By that standard, he was only now beginning to understand the full extent of his legacy. In the weeks that followed, the unofficial training sessions in the hydroponics bay became officially sanctioned by station authorities. Proper equipment was allocated, schedules were established, and word spread to other outposts about the innovative program developing on Nexus 12. Cadets who had once dreaded training now eagerly anticipated it. The community that formed around Joran and Zara's teaching extended beyond combat skills to include mutual support in academic studies, cultural exchange among different species, and even station improvement projects. 3 months after the confrontation with Voktal, a visitor arrived from the Imperial Center, an official inspector sent to evaluate the new training program. The tall, elegant Saracellan wore the formal uniform of the Imperial Education Corps, her feathered crest indicating high rank. "Impressive," she remarked as she observed a session led by Zara while Joran worked individually with several cadets who needed extra attention. "Your methods are unorthodox, but the results speak for themselves. These cadets show better form and understanding than many I've seen in programs twice as old. We believe in teaching principles, not just techniques," Joran explained. "When cadets understand why they're performing a movement in a certain way, they adapt more quickly to different situations." The inspector nodded, making notes on her data pad. "And the collaborative approach is fascinating. I've never seen senior cadets so invested in helping juniors progress." "That's Zara's innovation," Joran said with pride. "She established a mentorship system where each advanced cadet is responsible for helping 2 newer ones. They learn by teaching, often discovering insights they missed as students." Across the training floor, Zara was demonstrating a defensive stance to a group that included Alex, Corin, and several newer cadets who had joined since the program became official. Her quiet confidence and clear explanations held their complete attention. "Your granddaughter is quite remarkable," the inspector observed. "It's unusual to see such teaching skill in one so young." Joran watched as Zara patiently corrected a Solarian cadet's grip on a practice staff. She understands something that took me years to learn, that true strength comes from lifting others, not from dominance. The inspector completed her evaluation with a formal recommendation that the Nexus 12 program be used as a model for other outposts. More significantly, she offered several cadets, including Zara, direct nominations to the Imperial Academy, an honor usually reserved for those with political connections or extraordinary test scores. That evening, as Joran and Zara walked back to their quarters, she was uncharacteristically quiet. "The nomination bothers you," Joran observed. It wasn't a question. Zara nodded slowly. "It's an incredible opportunity. The Academy. It's what every cadet dreams of. But I'd have to leave Nexus 12, leave what we're building here." She gestured back toward the hydroponics bay, now officially designated as Training Center 2. "Leave you?" Joran smiled gently. "Growth often requires leaving familiar places. Zara, that's the natural order of things. What about our students? Our program is just getting established. They'll continue to learn and grow, with or without us. That's the test of a good teacher, whether what you've built can stand without your constant presence." They walked in silence for a moment, passing through the bustling central corridor of Level 5. Station residents nodded respectfully as they passed. The story of their confrontation with Voktal had made them minor celebrities on Nexus 12. "I'm not sure what I want," Zara admitted finally. "You have time to decide," Joran assured her. "The Academy nomination doesn't expire for 6 months. Use that time to consider your path, not what others expect of you, but what will allow you to contribute most fully." As they entered their quarters, Zara removed the Imperial Guard medallion from her pocket, where she carried it daily, in the 3 months since Joran had given it to her. Its polished surface had acquired small scratches and the subtle patina that came from being handled often. Like the legacy it represented, it was no longer pristine, but alive, changing with use and time. "Whatever you decide," Joran said, watching as she set the medallion carefully on a shelf beside her bed. "Remember that legacies aren't about preserving the past exactly as it was. They're about taking the best of what came before and adapting it to new challenges." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "Like you did when you came here and became a maintenance worker. And like you did when you transformed from a quiet cadet into a leader." Joran added with pride, "Our circumstances change, but our core principles remain. That's the true meaning of honor, not rigid adherence to tradition, but fidelity to deeper values across changing contexts." The next morning, as sun lamps simulated dawn in the Hydroponics Bay Training Center, Zara led the cadets through opening exercises. As she demonstrated a sequence that flowed from defense to counterattack, she felt a sense of purpose that transcended her earlier uncertainties. Whether her future led to the Imperial Academy or kept her at Nexus 12, the lessons she had learned about integrity, about leadership, about turning humiliation into growth would remain with her. Just as her grandfather had carried his skills and values from the Imperial Center to this distant outpost, she would carry what she had learned here into whatever challenges lay ahead. Around her, cadets of a dozen different species moved in synchrony, their faces reflecting concentration and mutual respect rather than the fear that had characterized Voktal's regime. This, she realized, was the true legacy her grandfather had passed to her, not combat techniques or imperial connections, but the understanding that real strength came from building others up rather than tearing them down. As the morning session progressed, Joran observed from the edge of the training floor, offering occasional guidance but increasingly allowing Zara to direct the program. His expression was serene, containing both pride in what his granddaughter had become and anticipation of what she would yet achieve. The Imperial Guard medallion no longer rested in his possession, but its meaning, honor earned through integrity rather than intimidation, lived on more vibrantly than ever in this garden of growth they had cultivated together from the ruins of Voktal's abusive system. And as light from the hydroponics lamps caught the diverse faces of cadets learning not just to fight, but to support one another, the future of Outpost Nexus 12 shone with possibilities that extended far beyond combat training, possibilities built on the foundation of respect and community that had emerged from a single moment of courage, when a teen had refused to accept humiliation and an old mechanic had stepped forward to reveal the truth of who he was. In that moment of revelation, both had discovered something essential, that true legacy was not about preserving status or authority, but about passing on the courage to stand against abuse and the wisdom to build something better in its place. That lesson, embodied in their daily practice and in the community they had fostered, would continue to grow and evolve long after both had moved on to whatever challenges awaited them in the vast, complex universe beyond Nexus 12's metal walls.